It's the kind of coincidence that sends chills down your spine. Whitney Houston's tragic death in 2012 shocked the world. But when her daughter, Bobbi Kristina Brown, was found unresponsive in a bathtub, under the exact same circumstances just 3 years later, it became impossible to ignore the unsettling similarities. Was this really just fate? Or was something far more sinister at play? According to Bobbi Brown, there's only one person who was around during both devastating moments. And while he refuses to say the name out loud, we all know who he's talking about, Nick Gordon. But was Nick the mastermind, or was he just a pawn in a bigger, darker game? The more you dig into this story, the more disturbing the details become. Buckle up, because what you're about to hear might change the way you look at these tragedies forever. Bobbi Kristina Brown wasn't just Whitney Houston's daughter. She was her shadow, her biggest fan, and her constant companion. She grew up in the spotlight, always just a step behind her mother, watching, learning, and absorbing everything. From an infant cradled in Whitney's arms, during an interview with Barbara Walters, to a toddler being lifted on stage at the American Music Awards, Chrissy, as her family called her, was destined for stardom. But behind the dazzling lights and glamorous performances, Chrissy witnessed more than just her mother's success. She saw the struggles, the pressure, the fights, and most importantly, the people who were always around when things started to spiral. And that's where the story takes a chilling turn. When Whitney died on February 11, 2012, Chrissy's world shattered. She was one of the first people at the scene, so overwhelmed by grief that she had to be hospitalized for a nervous breakdown. She was only 18 at the time, barely an adult, but she was already being thrust into the chaos of loss, media scrutiny, and the pressure of living up to a mother who was more than just a singer. She was a legend. And then suddenly the spotlight shifted. Everyone wanted to know what would happen to Bobbi Kristina now. Would she carry on Whitney's legacy? Would she rise from the tragedy and find her own voice? The cameras followed her every move, from emotional interviews to award show appearances to a brief acting career in a Tyler Perry series. It seemed like she was trying to move forward, but behind closed doors, her world was unraveling. When Whitney Houston brought Nick Gordon into her home as a teenager, she saw him as family, an unofficial son, a boy who needed love and guidance. But over time, his relationship with Bobbi Kristina evolved into something far more complicated. From childhood friends to lovers to a so-called marriage that was later exposed as a lie, Nick Gordon's presence in Bobbi Kristina's life was anything but ordinary. After Whitney's death, Chrissy clung to Nick like a lifeline. He was her protector, her confidant, and the one person who seemed to understand her pain. But according to those closest to her, their relationship quickly turned toxic. There were whispers of control, manipulation, and even violence. Friends claimed that Nick isolated her, kept her away from family, and allegedly exploited her grief for his own gain, emotionally, physically, and financially. Reports later revealed that Nick posed as Bobbi Kristina's husband to gain access to her inheritance, transferring money from her accounts and controlling every aspect of her life. Even more chilling, multiple sources claimed he was physically abusive, with allegations that he dragged her upstairs by her hair, knocked out her teeth, and left her bruised and broken behind closed doors. And then came January 31st, 2015. Bobbi Kristina was found unresponsive in the Georgia home she shared with Nick, face down in the bathtub, just like her mother. By the time paramedics arrived, it was too late. She had suffered irreversible brain damage. After months in a medically induced coma, she passed away on July 26, 2015, at just 22 years old. But here's where things get even more disturbing. The medical examiner's report ruled her cause of death as drowning with drug intoxication, but it was never determined whether it was an accident or something much worse. The toxicology report found alcohol, morphine, sedatives, and anti-anxiety medications in her system, but no solid proof of how they got there or why she ended up in that bathtub in the first place. And then, just like that, Nick Gordon walked away. Bobbi Kristina's death was a devastating blow, but it was the circumstances surrounding it that left people in shock. The eerie similarities between her passing and Whitney Houston's death were impossible to ignore. Both mother and daughter were found submerged in bathtubs. Both had drugs in their systems. Both deaths were ruled as drowning with contributing factors. But the biggest connection of all, Nick Gordon was present in both situations. For years, Bobbi Brown, Leola Brown, Bobbi's sister, and other members of the family have spoken out, insisting that Bobbi Kristina's death was not an accident. In fact, the lawsuit filed by her court-appointed conservator directly accused Nick Gordon of giving her a toxic cocktail before placing her in the bathtub face down. Allegations of abuse, financial exploitation, and manipulation all painted a dark picture of what Bobbi Kristina may have endured in her final months. But the biggest bombshell came when people started questioning whether Whitney's death was also not what it seemed. One of the most shocking details that surfaced after Whitney's passing was that she had far less water in her lungs than expected for a drowning victim. Some experts suggested that this could mean she was already unconscious, or even deceased before she entered the bathtub. Add to that the rumors that she was seen arguing with industry executives, including Clive Davis, just days before her death, and suddenly her passing seemed less like an unfortunate accident and more like a carefully orchestrated event. And what about Bobbi Kristina? According to sources close to her, she may have known too much about what really happened to her mother. Reports suggest that she was present for some of Whitney's final conversations, including an alleged argument with Clive Davis just 2 days before her death. Could it be that she overheard something she wasn't supposed to? And if so, was her tragic fate planned to silence her before she could speak out? Bobbi Brown himself has openly stated that he believes his daughter was starved to death and did not die solely from drowning. He's also pointed out that Nick Gordon was the only person present in both Whitney and Bobbi Kristina's final moments, and that alone raises disturbing questions. But before any real answers could come to light, Nick Gordon was found dead in 2020 of a reported heroin overdose. With him gone, the truth about what really happened to Whitney and Bobbi Kristina may have been buried forever. With both Whitney Houston and Bobbi Kristina Brown gone, one name kept resurfacing: Nick Gordon. His involvement in their lives, his alleged history of abuse, and his presence during both of their final moments raised a disturbing question. Was he simply unlucky, or was he part of something far more sinister? Nick had no biological relation to Bobbi Kristina, yet Whitney took him in as a teenager and treated him like a son. He grew up in her home, lived as part of her family, and was by Bobbi Kristina's side for years. But after Whitney's passing, their relationship took a turn that no one saw coming. Nick and Bobbi Kristina became romantically involved, claimed they were married, which was later proven false, and quickly became entangled in a toxic, controlling dynamic. Bobbi Kristina's friends and family repeatedly warned her about Nick. Reports surfaced of physical abuse, manipulation, and financial exploitation. According to witnesses, Nick isolated her from loved ones, controlled her finances, and had violent outbursts behind closed doors. One of the most chilling accusations came from a lawsuit filed by Bobbi Kristina's conservator, which stated that Nick physically assaulted her just days before she was found in the bathtub. Allegedly, he knocked out her teeth, dragged her up a staircase by her hair, and left her battered and bruised. Even more disturbing? Nick was accused of giving her a toxic cocktail before placing her face down in the bathtub, mimicking the exact way her mother was found 3 years earlier. People close to Bobbi Kristina claim she knew something about her mother's death, something dangerous. She had been present during some of Whitney's final arguments, particularly with music executives. There were even whispers that she planned to speak out about what really happened that night at the Beverly Hilton. Then suddenly she was gone. Bobbi Brown, her father, has been outspoken about the fact that his daughter did not die in an accidental drowning. He believes she was murdered and has consistently pointed to Nick Gordon as the person responsible. For years, Nick Gordon denied any involvement in Bobbi Kristina's death. He appeared on interviews crying, begging for sympathy, and insisting that he loved her. But as the legal battles continued, his credibility crumbled. He was ordered to pay $36 million in a wrongful death lawsuit, though he never faced criminal charges. Then, in 2020, Nick Gordon was found dead from a heroin overdose in Florida. With his death, any answers he may have held about Whitney and Bobbi Kristina's passing disappeared. At first glance, the deaths of Whitney Houston and Bobbi Kristina Brown seemed eerily similar. Both found unconscious in bathtubs, both with drugs in their systems, and both surrounded by unanswered questions. But when you dig deeper, the pattern becomes even more disturbing. Many believe Bobbi Kristina knew more than she was supposed to about what really happened to her mother. She was there during some of Whitney's biggest fights in the days leading up to her death. She saw the tension, the fear, and, allegedly, the people who may have wanted Whitney silenced. And then, just like her mother, Bobbi Kristina was gone. One of the biggest red flags in Whitney's case is the timing of her death. She was found dead just hours before Clive Davis's annual pre-Grammy party, a party that continued downstairs at the same hotel as paramedics removed her lifeless body. People close to Whitney claimed she was in distress in her final days. She was reportedly involved in heated confrontations with powerful industry figures, including Clive Davis. According to some sources, she even had a physical altercation with someone 2 days before her death. Now, here's where it gets creepy. Bobbi Kristina was there. She witnessed the fights. She saw her mother's erratic behavior. She may have even overheard conversations that put a target on her back. And just like Whitney, her final moments mirrored a nightmare that had already played out. Before she was found unresponsive, Bobbi Kristina was making plans to leave. She wanted to move to Los Angeles to be closer to her father and rebuild her career. She was distancing herself from Nick Gordon, a move that reportedly made him furious, and planned to meet with a friend to discuss her suspicions about her mother's death. But before she could take action, she ended up unconscious in a bathtub, just like Whitney. Family members believe this was no accident. Some even claim that Bobbi Kristina was silenced before she could reveal what she knew. Bobbi Kristina's death wasn't just tragic, it was convenient. She was the last person alive who could have connected the dots between Whitney's suspicious death and the people around her in her final days. If Whitney was targeted, Bobbi Kristina could have been next.